Book 1, Law of Salimi, Chapter 54, Law of Salimi, The Student and Bullshit. As far as I could ever remember in my life, I had always been in a state of learning and discovering something new in my life. Even before going to any form of education institution, I had learned about many things in my upbringing. I started to study at the kindergarten of Tariqa Amal for 1 year. I continued studying for my primary education for 6 years, from 7 to 12 years old. Next, I studied for 3 more years at high school education, from 13 to 15 years old at Taman Melawati. In addition, I commenced my study for 2 years at Maktab Sabah from 16 to 17 years old. It took me for 3 years to complete my Diploma of Business Study at UiTM campus Menggata. Later, I completed my degree of International Business at UiTM main campus Shah Alam from 20 to 22 years old at 2003. I worked for several employments until 2008, which mostly related in the industry of education. During my employment, I spent my life to continuously studying about every related field of knowledge that improved my jobs. At reinsurance company, I studied on aviation, medical injuries, crime investigation, accidental damage, and every related knowledge which improved my performance in my task about handling claims. I also focused on research methodology, teaching pedagogy, business ethics, business communications, marketing, advertising, customer services, retailing, and various fields of studies in order to improve my teaching abilities and expand my knowledge, as well as sharing them to my students. Furthermore, I also studied social sciences, motivational skills, public speaking, and several other knowledge because it helped me to provide speeches at school around Kuala Lumpur and Selangor during my task as lecturer at the private college Ampang branch in July 2008 until the present of 2015. I became a full-time student at the University for my PhD program and later discontinued my status as student. For about 7 years, I studied in various fields of knowledge and studies which augment my focus of debt and riba, or usury, economy, banking industry, and other subject matter at the highest possible level of PhD research. Eventually, I was unable to complete my PhD because I had exceeded my 4-year limits as stipulated by my scholarship conditions. At this moment of writing this book, I am trying to acquire employment for teaching position while focusing on writing about my life story. In addition, I also studied from documentaries via online, from scholars, and numerous other sources which enhanced my knowledge so that I could pursue on the possibility of making the writing of books as my career of choice. I started to discover that I am leaning towards science fiction writing genre with the introduction of Islamic perspective, which seemed to be lacking in most other writers in the industry. Basically speaking, for every second of my life, which possibly including my duration of 9 months before my birth, I had been spending my whole life as a student. Now, at the age of 33 years old, when anyone asks me of my job, I would reply that I am a student. I am passionate about learning and knowledge, which led me to walk the path of a scholar and pursuit for truth based on the teachings of Islam. I wish to learn more about the understanding Islam, implementing the teachings of Islam into my life in order to achieve the concept of moderation living and Islam as my way of life. With all the sins that I have done in my life, I felt that the path of a scholar and the pursuit for knowledge is the only way that I could redeem myself in front of Allah the Almighty. In accordance to the teachings of Islam, Every knowledge that I had acquired in my life should be shared with everyone, which I meant to manifest via the process of teachings as well as sharing of knowledge from writing books that I hope could be disseminated to everyone as much as possible with the least amount of cost. This is the main reason that I am writing this particular book, hopefully hundreds more in the future before I reach the end of my life. I know that in the present life, most of the members of society would simply doubt my intent and effort to walk this path in my life. In fact, when a person asks about my status of PhD studies, I explain to him that I had reached my goals of gaining knowledge while unable to acquire my PhD certificate and the title of Doctor of Philosophy. He simply replied, "Bullshit." When he said that, I just smiled because I knew that the masses public wouldn't be able to see this path because not everyone was able to perceive it. What do you, the reader, think about my choice to pursue for knowledge and walking the path of a scholar? Is it something that could be considered as admirable or merely bullshit? In reality, I could not give you the absolute answer because it is based on perception and opinion of each individual. To me, I feel that my choice is based on my understandings of the teachings of Islam, regardless of how others might perceive it. In most cases, most of my choices would be perceived odd and weird to many Muslims as well as non-Muslims. I believe that only those who can truly understand the teachings of Islam would be able to see the reasoning behind the decision made in my life. As I had met numerous scholars in my life, only very few select one who would consider that my path of a scholar and the pursuit of knowledge as based on the teachings of Islam. Nonetheless, I had no regret for not being able to complete my PhD program, considering the experience and level of knowledge that I had acquired during the 7 years spent from my PhD program. I would have to be grateful to Allah the Almighty for giving me the opportunity to work with my supervisor, which is known as Respondent 001, because of the unorthodox freedom given to me to pursue my research based on my own pace. He also encouraged me to gain as much knowledge as possible to improve my understanding about my research, even though such method was not implemented by other lecturers at the university. Due to that, I had gained the chance to acquire knowledge and from various fields of knowledge which augment my focus of my PhD thesis and research. Albeit, I might not be able to complete my PhD thesis officially via the university, I do intend to write it up in an upcoming book in the future. If you, the reader, is wondering why I do not explore too much about my PhD research in this book, it is because the subject matter of my PhD research was rather quite complicated, sensitive, and controversial. The subject matter might require certain measure of treatment in order to protect and camouflage certain elements that I wish to highlight and share as knowledge to the masses public without causing harm to others or anyone. Basically speaking, I felt that I had gained a significant amount of knowledge, especially in my subject matter of my PhD research during the duration of the research. I had met numerous experts and scholars, be it for official interviews or unofficial observation, where their intent were captured and analyzed. In an example, I had spoken to a great scholar and expert in the Islamic banking system and had opportunities to speak with him on one-to-one basis. Based on my observation, this scholar, which will be referred as Respondent 44, had around 30 years of working experience in banking industry at global level. Respondent 44 was a well-known professor who had written numerous papers and journals regarding to Islamic banking system. When respondent 44 had visited to Malaysia and the university, I attended to all of his talks and presentations on the subject matter of Islamic banking system. Essentially, I agreed with everything he had presented except for one particular area which involved the concept of riba or usury in his research. According to him, riba or usury should be highly regulated in order to reduce the possible harm, whereas Islam would utterly prohibit the practice of riba from any economy. When I had a chance to speak with him with one-to-one at his room provided by the university, I suggested that the Islamic perspective on the utter prohibition of riba, which was not included in his research. Respondent 44 just kept quiet, calm, and his facial expression suggested that he was in deep and serious thought on the suggestion. After I completed my suggestion, he said that he had not researched on the subject matter and would be pursuing the matter on his future research. He also added that it would take him about 6 months to do so, and he would get back to me. Obviously, I was rather surprised with this great scholar's response, which was very open to my suggestions as compared to virtually all of my other respondents who were closed to any new ideas. Nonetheless, I assumed that respondent 44 was simply trying to be polite and responded in such a way because we might not be in contact ever again in the possible future. Hence, I did not really took his response very seriously because no other scholars at professor level would be serious enough to entertain my suggestions, considering I was just a student. I guess this event was already written and planned by Allah the Almighty to show me about the occurrence of impossibility when it comes to life, especially when everything was based on the will of Allah the All-Knowing. So, as I stupidly assumed that respondent 44 was never going to keep his word, I just forget about his response and focus on my research without much hope of ever in coming contact with him again. As time goes by, one fine day as I opened my email, I saw his name appearing from a talk by respondent 44 at the university. It simply piqued my curiosity to attend the talk. I began remembering his words, what the last time that I had met him, where he would research my suggestions. During his presentation, I saw pretty much of the same subject matter as presented the last time that I saw him. However, I began to realize that he added 3 slides which focused exactly on his findings based on my suggestions. Essentially, respondent 44 had performed rigorous research based on my suggestions and discovered his own evidences to support the abolishment of riba, which was in line with the teachings of Islam. While I was waiting my turn to meet him after his presentation, he was approached by this one woman who introduced herself as a professor in a certain university in Malaysia. According to her, she was astounded with respondent 44's presentation, which highlighted that she had never heard the conclusion in the presentation. It seemed that the Malaysian professor confessed that she never knew about the finding where prohibition of riba or usury is as presented, even though she claimed to be a very experienced practitioner in Islamic banking practice. After respondent 44 was available, I spoke to him and he smiled with confession that he had arrived with his finding based on my suggestions on my PhD research. He found new evidences which I had never found on my own research to suggest how riba should be abolished instead of being offered as alternative choice for consumers. In addition, he also added several other suggestions based on our one-to-one discussion that we had about 6 months earlier. Based on his experience, it seemed that my PhD research, based on the guidance from my supervisor, Respondent 001, had arrived at the level where Respondent 44, who was a professor at global level expertise in Islamic banking system, could consider as well as improve his own research studies. Moreover, it might possibly suggest that my PhD research finding had certain elements which might not been discovered by numerous experts, scholars, practitioners and Sharia advisors in Islamic banking system, considering that it required multiple various fields of knowledge across several different industries, especially knowledge from both Islamic banking as well as conventional banking knowledge. In addition, my PhD research had discovered further knowledge which highlighted the existence of certain scholars who fought against the present Islamic banking system in Malaysia. Based on my official research interview during my PhD research, I had met at least 2 of the scholars who started the establishment of Islamic banking system in Malaysia around the year of 1980s. One of the scholars interviewed showed certain characteristics which might be considered as not in line with the true essence and spirit of Islam thesis. The other scholar who was interviewed on a different time had displayed the lacking of knowledge in terms of conventional banking concept, which was clearly prohibited in the teachings of Islam. In effect, it had suggested that it might be possible that both of the scholars who initiated the establishment of Islamic banking system in Malaysia might not possess the adequate knowledge required. This has been discovered in my PhD research that pointed out to be extremely vital in order to ensure that the present Islamic banking system in Malaysia to be in line with the teachings of Islam, Sharia, Maqasid Sharia, as well as possessing the true essence and spirit of Islam thesis. Based on this example and numerous other findings in my PhD research, it might be possible to suggest that the level of knowledge in my thesis could have reached ample knowledge to be at par with numerous great scholars at global level. It might even suggest that this discovery made in my PhD research could be beyond the level of certain great scholars and experts in the field of Islamic banking systems in Malaysia. Frankly speaking, I am not suggesting that I am a great scholar and to be perceived by anyone as such, considering the original ideas was provided by and supervised by Respondent 001. However, I would like to suggest that scholars who were interviewed during my PhD research duration should consider to enhance their own knowledge, especially regarding conventional banking system, which seem to be severely lacking amongst majority of scholars and experts interviewed. The objective that I am highlighting, this finding in my PhD research, and my refusal to omit this knowledge because I felt that I should share my findings and knowledge with everyone based on the teachings of Islam and Sharia. Furthermore, I wish to help improve the present Islamic banking system in Malaysia as well as at global level in order to remove any form of practice for riba, interest and usury. Moreover, I would also like to inform that any replication of the effect of riba or usury would simply defeat the purpose of prohibiting riba in the teachings of Islam as well as its mention in the Holy Quran and Sunnah. Hence, the reason that I am mentioning this in my book is for everyone to discover the present flaw that existed in the present system that was established in our present economic system, which encompassed into every economy from all over the world. I would simply wish to abolish riba and replication of riba practice as mentioned in the Holy Quran and Sunnah merely to fulfill my duty of sharing knowledge to the masses public. Clearly, I do not wish to gain anything from writing this book as about my true life story, except to share knowledge and possibly some income in order to repay my debt of RM 120,000 ringgit Malaysia, in the hope that in doing so, I would be practicing Islam as a way of life. With that said, if you still think that my reason for not being able to complete my PhD program, acquire my PhD certificate, and obtain the title Doctor of Philosophy as bullshit, it might be possible that something might be amiss in your intent in life. Maybe you need to set your intention in your heart to change from bad to good, good to better, and better to the best possible. Although it might also be possible that your vision might be veiled from seeing the truth. If so, I would greatly suggest a good reading from Sheikh Imran and Hossein, who wrote the book Prohibition of Riba in the Quran and Sunnah, with the hope that Allah the Merciful might offer you with hidayah or light of guidance. It might be difficult to acquire the said book because it seemed that it had been made to be outside of the standard channel of publication circle, or the book simply did not exist. Notwithstanding, if you are serious and honest in your intention to discover the truth, Allah the All-Knowing might just show you the way and make the discovery of such book much easier. Considering the situation surrounding the book, I might be writing another book to explore the findings of my PhD research, which uses the book as one of the core references. The other alternative would be to simply wait for that book, which should be made available to every individual on earth. With that, we have reached the end of chapter 54, and thank you very much for listening. Hope to see you again in the next chapter. Thank you very much for it, and see you soon.